Hello, I'm Deborah Malone, founder of The Internationalist and host of Internationalist Marketing TV. Today's guest is Tim Ringel, founder and global CEO of Meet the People. Tim, it is a pleasure to see you in the middle of New York City, and I am really looking forward to our conversation because I think we're going to touch on some interesting topics.
Perfect. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
A pleasure. No, very much a pleasure. Now, look, before we talk about Meet the People, I'd really be curious about your views on the business of advertising today. Um, I'm sure you have quite an interesting perspective because you're both a serial entrepreneur and a startup investor, as well as an ad industry veteran. So let me just throw something out there. Are we at a critical inflection point now in the evolution of agencies or in addressing the client agency needs?
Oh, I would say yes. Or definitely yes. But if you would have asked anyone else 10 years ago, they would have said yes as well, and 20 years ago as well, because the advertising industry at large has a tendency of falling in love with shiny objects. So there's always a shiny object, and that's what I'm trying to explain to my people within Meet the People, but also to all our clients, that we're going through a fundamental shift that is not a shiny object. And that fundamental shift, very different to last year and the year before, as you know, in the industry, we really always have something every year that the industry focuses on. It's a little bit like fashion, you know. Now all the now all the loose pants are coming back, and the stuff I wore in the 90s are coming back, right? Denim is big. So it's similar to advertising, where every year advertising needs something to run after. Last year it was NFTs, the year before it was data lakes, and now everybody thinks AI is going to change the advertising world, right? So, but I'm not necessarily talking about that. These things are always there, and we can touch on AI maybe down the road. But the fundamental shift that we are seeing right now has been in the making for probably more than 15 years. And we're coming to an inflection point for two reasons. So let me start where this fundamental shift was started. The advertising industry, if you have ever watched Mad Men, the TV series, right, really came out of creative and then was disrupted by media, because media pre-TV, linear TV, linear TV was very much focused on radio and newspapers, right? And the people who designed the creative aspects of our work, they were clearly dominating that narrative. And then TV came along, and a lot of money was made, so both got separated. And with media becoming, especially in the United States, such a massive part of the business at such high margins, things like the upfronts were created, and things like volume negotiations were created. Now I'm in somewhere in the 60s, 70s, 80s, right? And that created entry barriers, and that allowed for large groups to be created, and the WPPs, the Publicis, the IPGs, the Omnicoms. But in the last 15 years, I should say 20, but really 15 years, that entire model of entry barriers have shifted on its head. Today, if you want to be a successful brand from an advertising perspective, there are no entry barriers, but your knowledge about digital channels, right? So it's all stuff you can learn, no matter if it's on TikTok, on Google, within the Meta infrastructure, on Snapchat, on programmatic advertising. If you have a credit card under your name and you have a good idea, you can build a successful brand through advertising today. And in prior times, that wasn't possible because there were entry barriers. You couldn't just call a TV channel and book TV advertising. You couldn't just call a newspaper and get a one-pager out. First, it was too expensive. You couldn't pay in fragments or just a piece of it, right? And you clearly couldn't buy it if you didn't have a relationship there. So today, you don't need a relationship. Everything is self-service. So that has put the media side of the business on its head. At the same time, the most successful campaigns out there, let's talk social, right, that break the internet or are extremely viral, they don't necessarily come from educated creatives and designers. They come through users. It's user generated, or at least user amplified. So that means earned, owned, and gained, that has completely changed. On top of that, and this is where the amplification happens, besides the fact that the platforms have taken over, what more than 55% of all media goes through digital now, and probably 99% of that goes through a few platforms, right? On top of that, we had a fundamental shift how advertising agencies work and clients, because now we're back in the office partially, but for the last 3 years, people haven't been back in the office. The way what my people within my organization expect from a work environment has fundamentally changed. The client expectations have fundamentally changed because digital has become so important. At the same time, the expectation of people in the industry, what their work looks like, the tools you use has changed. And this is why I think we're coming to a point where, as in many industries, at some point, there's so many changes that have happened that you need to kind of reinvent the way how the industry works. And I'm not saying I'm the smartest cookie on the planet who's the only one who figures this out. A lot of people work on how this could look like. We are just one of many, but I think we have a right to exist because there's a gap between the work that clients need, the expectation that talent in the industry has, and if we can do it a little bit better than it is right now, or it has been in the past, we have already made a massive move. That's the idea.
Well, you raise a lot of issues just by running through that, and maybe we should take them apart. So first of all, the fundamental change that you're talking about is really a combination of the need for new business models to satisfy, for lack of a better term, a digital age. I mean, I know we're probably in a post-digital age, but in terms of how we're comparing several decades ago and how the industry was in its heyday when everybody wanted to go into advertising. Now, the fact that it's, as you say, more easily accessible to anybody with a credit card and access to a platform and an idea, that doesn't make it sophisticated. So let's just start breaking some of this apart. Does creativity matter? Can creativity be great on social media? Is social media the only way to reach people? Is it all about media and not about anything else? Let's start there. And then I have, so many other questions.
Great question. So if you would have interviewed me, so I'm now 47. I've been in the industry for 26 years. I started my first digital agency when I was 21. And I started on the search side of things, working with Google when they became big. My first agency grew, and I built my first company on the back of Google's success, and then later on Meta, and then later on other channels. If you would have asked me 10, 15 years ago, I would have said creativity doesn't matter, measurability matters. If I can't measure where my dollars go and how they work for me, I don't need the work anymore. I'm restating this right now, and I've done this for a few years now, and say media doesn't matter anymore. Creativity is everything that matters, because the world again has changed. When I made that statement 15 years ago or 10 years ago, platforms that would use white label products that have the same quality but no brand didn't exist. Today, you can buy anything on Amazon, you get it delivered within 24 hours into your garage, and it says Amazon Basics on it. How do you differentiate yourself as a detergent, no matter if you're eco-friendly, sustainable, whatever that is, if you don't have a brand? So creativity is utmost important now, but what clients and what we expect from creativity is that it still has a measurable impact, right? So just coming up with something beautiful, it's not going to be enough anymore. That, I hope that helps with the first question. So my answer to that is creativity absolutely matters, because in a world that is highly fragmented and where something that doesn't go viral doesn't make it successful anymore, and you can't force virality, you have to have a creative idea to create something that's truly viral, right? Or truly different to what's out there. So creativity is extremely important. Media has come to a point where either you buy reach, so you're still going to do your Super Bowl ad for $10 million for 20 seconds, or you amplify organic reach with media supplement, right? And that's what we talk about when we talk about social. So, and we have to look at it in two ways. If I talk about consumer products, I think a social first strategy is of utmost importance, because the way how you're gonna, besides the fact that you need a brand architecture, you need a real meaning behind the brand you're creating, you need all the works, and you need to be authentic, right? We have learned this in the last couple of years, that consumers don't want brands that promise something, don't deliver on it. So you have to do all that, right? But ultimately, the success of your brand is how the creative idea is going to carry through social with longevity. So you have to have a social first approach when you create a consumer product. So number one, otherwise no network effects and so on and so forth. If you're in the B2B space, so you create a B2B brand, that is a little different, because a brand in the consumer space can pop and be successful for a certain amount of time, even though it has not yet delivered trust. In the B2B space, it's all about trust. We do talk to the same human being. I'm a decision maker at home when I buy a consumer product. I'm also a decision maker in the business when I choose a vendor. But I need a different trust level if I spend $20 on a subscription versus I spend $20,000 on a vendor, right? So that's where we have to differentiate a little bit. What is your audience? And but creativity is of the utmost importance.
Quick question and then a longer question. So is going viral now the definition of creativity?
Not really. I hope not. I think people can make beautiful creative work and it can have a purpose without it needing to be successful on social, right? Like, let's make the movie example, right? Independent movies are absolutely beautiful if you take the time to really understand them and watch them. So I enjoy that, but I don't necessarily need them to be mass market, right? That's the same also when we talk about creativity in the advertising space. But I have to say, sadly so, no brand deploys $10 million on a creative concept and maybe a media buy if it's not measurable anymore. So they do want commercial outcome, right? So you do need creativity to get there. Just repurposing something that already exists not going to make you successful in this hyper frequency world where attention span is 3 seconds, right? So that's a problem. And social platforms have created with the endless scrolling and the skipping and whatnot, they have created a culture where everything I don't want, I can skip, right? So you need to really capture the attention of the audience.
The other longer question that I was going to ask out of what you said was, you were saying, you know, you also have to think about the brand architecture and so on. Now, is that the client's responsibility? Or are we seeing more consulting firms coming along that are trying to help with that? I'm just curious, because I'd then like to lead into new business models and then, of course, to meet the people.
I mean, somebody who knows me and my thesis in the industry would say this is a very well teed up question, because it plays exactly into what I believe is extremely important. So brand architecture is obviously the responsibility of the people who own the brand. Nevertheless, it's one of the main things we do for all our clients as an agency. Why? Because if you haven't figured out what your brand should stand for with longevity, I'm not talking short term, like a week, a month, or a few years, like the 10-year plan on how your brand, what it should stand for as a corporation, and then you're making a massive mistake. And how does your brand ecosystem fit into that overall strategy? That's a lot of the work that one of our agencies, VSA partners, does every day. They're masters in brand design and brand architecture, and they consult some of the largest companies in the United States on how to do it better and how to do it consistently over a long period of time. To make an example, one of our longest standing clients within VSA partners is IBM for 25 years. And we're helping them on their brand architecture. That's real longevity, right? You can have some funky ideas that live on social for a certain while, or lead generation, B2B, capturing ideas, but there needs to be underlying principles that you work against. And that's why I start with brand architecture. Would I trust that to a consultant as I see consultants? Probably not, but they're also our competitions, right?
Yeah, and I
right?
think it's
pushing into the space.
Yeah. It's also a terminology issue, because the term obviously to consult is to
Right.
strategize with someone to bring out the best results. So we just keep classifying, and that's interesting, the classifications. So you talked about the fundamental change in terms of new business models. Now, obviously, you're creating a new business model. And I know that the factors are not only the history of the business, the factors are, the result of the pandemic, the way that we work, the way that we look for meaning, and all of this. So talk about business models as you see them in terms of what's broken and what could be, something, something that works. And I assume that's going to bring us into your model of meet.
Right. Well, again, and I always say this, like, I don't have the perfect answer how the agency industry going to look like in 5 years. I have a thesis, and I look and I talk to a lot of people in the industry. I'm friendly with most of the people who build these constructs at this moment in time and have built them in the past. So I think my belief in my thesis is that what clients ultimately want. So there's really two audiences here. One is the client or the brand, and the other audience is the people who work in the industry. And if you find the Goldilocks zone between these two, then you can kind of like on autopilot build a successful business, right? That's the idea. So if you create a product that's really needed and you have happy people deploying that product, delivering that product, you're going to be in a Goldilocks zone with your business. So that's really the idea here. So what clients really need, and we have to kind of cluster this. So I simplify this. So there's really 3 clusters of clients, if I want to simplify it. The really large corporations, the multi-billion-dollar businesses in revenue, who have been born many years ago and have created an internal culture of silos within their organization, where the creative team doesn't speak to the content team. Each product has their own brand directors and decision makers. They live the fragmented ecosystem because they carry a lot of layers of hierarchy with them, right? And that's really their meaning. There's hundreds and thousands of people employed just to manage the hierarchy of things. So that's what I call the really large corporations. What they need impactful, honest help in being more successful in a digital world, or in a primarily digital world, right? So what we're doing there is we're helping them to understand the digital world and then translate the digital world into their product ecosystem and their brand ecosystem. So that's where I call ourselves, we are like the speedboat solution for them to digitalize themselves. That's cluster number 1. Cluster number 2 is mid-sized businesses. They have a different need. They're between $500 million to a few $1 billion of revenue, where they can't afford anymore because of their industry is being disrupted. Therefore, cost pressure, market volatility. They need to be way more efficient in how they do things, right? So they operated in these silos that came out of our industry and their industry, right? Where media doesn't talk to creative doesn't talk to tech, data is not collected because you have a 3-layer distribution model for your product, all the beautiful things. They need someone to help them fully integrate it without the silo thinking from A to Z, from a creative idea to how it lives on a digital platform in probably 10,000 different shapes and forms. And that is really also our sweet spot, where we work with mid-sized businesses to help them from A to Z with the entire strategy. How does the brand live now? How does the brand live in the future? How do we execute a creative idea for a product launch that goes then all the way living in social channels or on LinkedIn or wherever, right? So that's really cluster number 2. And then cluster number 3 are startups, young companies, sometimes really well funded, sometimes not funded at all. They need companies like us in app and flows. So, when they get funding, they usually need a lot of help, and then they don't have funding, they need no help. So we do work for startups very selectively, but we try to avoid that because it's very difficult for us to predict the work, and therefore how much help and the stickiness. because once and we have helped many startups in the last couple of years, successful big names. So we do that selectively, but it's not our core client customer cluster. So they have different needs, these three clusters, from my perspective, and we have a certain right to play in some of them as specialists and as generalists as well.
That's interesting. So then that is part of the Goldilocks equation. So there's these varying needs, whether it's legacy, mid-sized, caught in the middle, and selective startups. And then there is the other part of the equation, which you talk about as the people or talent. So I am guessing that you have a bit of a solution for that, because you've stated quite publicly that your vision is to create the world's first people-centric agency group that has, whether you call it a better work-life balance or no glass ceilings, or a real consideration for DEI. And if I'm correct, you've also raised, is it $150 million? Is that correct, to build Meet the People and acquire various agencies? And you really want to create a global agency group with $1 billion valuation. So
that's right.
How are you? So I mean, I guess you're just going out there every day and doing it, but for your Goldilocks solution, which seems the $1 billion valuation, it's I'm assuming you're saying, in all seriousness, it's the connection of meeting these various client needs with people that are more talented or happier or more flexible. Tell us about that. Why meet the people? Why meet the people?
So I, in my journey as an entrepreneur, as I said, I started with 21, building my first agency with 2 people in a basement in Germany, where I come from. And the largest business I ran, that was still my business, was 1,000 people with 25 offices in Europe, Middle East, and Asia. And then I came to the United States and built a business here with 3,000 people for Interpublic Group of companies. And I think Meet the People really is now the version of my past with the learnings of these different experiences on the corporate side as CEO of in the end 3,000 people business with 60 offices, and the entrepreneurial side. And the one thing I consistently realized through that journey, no matter if we were running search campaigns or created a creative narrative or helped clients as AOR in media or in creative, was that ultimately it's only the people that really matter. You know, no matter if on the client side or on the agency side, it's all about the people. This industry is a pure relationship business. People are not staying with an agency because of the agency itself. They stay because of the people on the client side. They stay because of their mentors and the people they learn from, right? So sadly so, lots of the larger groups, they have ended up being purely financial institutions. They're managed by finance people. They are not necessarily efficient. There's a lot of obstacles in the way to progress. You get really clear, get really clear feedback that, well, no, you have been doing an amazing job. You have been really kicking it out of the park here for this client, but I can't promote you. You haven't been here for 3 years, right? So this stuff is, from an entrepreneur's perspective, absolutely unnecessary. As you mentioned, the glass ceiling of having people progress within an infrastructure, that makes no sense that it exists. But why does it exist? It exists because the large groups have become bigger than their own clients. There's 60,000 people, 100,000 people. Again, there's too many layers in there who are protecting their jobs instead of thinking about delivering great client work and promoting people who have real talent. Are our people more talented than people who are there? No, obviously not, right? They all come from the same schools. They all have had similar experiences in life, hopefully, right? But what we're trying to do is we're trying to nurture, and happiness is the wrong word, but we're trying to nurture a better work environment of empowerment so that people can really shine and they can be celebrated. So when you work with Meet the People, for example, we don't put Meet the People as the front brand in front of a client. We have no clients at Meet the People. Like our agencies have clients and we promote the agencies and we promote the people behind the work. That is really what we're trying to do. Because for most of the time, when a large group wins a massive client, lo and behold, the press release is going to say, I don't know, I'm just making this up, right? Large holding company won this and that account. No mention of the people who actually did the work. I think that's a mistake. And many times that's done because they're scared that these people are going to be poached by other groups. But the reason is, if you're a good employer, these people want to stay with you no matter what, right? So we think promoting the talent behind the work, especially in an environment where everybody only talks about technology and efficiency all the time, is the right path to go, right? Because in the end, even if we use AI, even if AI is going to disrupt our industry to a certain extent, and it's gonna, right? It still matters, as we discussed just 10 minutes ago, how good is your creative idea? How different is what you're creating to what's already out there? And I would do the statement, and I would give the statement to say, I don't think that AI is going to replace someone with a really good creative idea who had a life of experiences for 30 years, right? I think AI is far from that. So if we want to be successful for our clients, we have to make sure that the people who do the work are in the center of the attention towards the client, towards the industry, and within our own group. So it's the Goldilocks zone is really answering to what the clients need. They don't need fragmentation. They don't need silos. They do want to have measurability of, hey, this creative idea actually sold this product, right? At the same time, we want to make sure that our people are happier. And I'm not saying we're going to get there 120%. That's probably, we're never going to be perfect, right? So we're going to make mistakes and we're gonna under deliver against the expectation. That's how you learn as a business. But we're trying to do it a little bit better every day. So hopefully, therefore, we create a better work environment, and that ideally creates a better work product. It sounds simple and philosophical, but that's how I believe the future of any work is going to have to look like.
No, it's interesting because in some ways it's a little bit of a conundrum in that here we are speaking via Zoom, and we might be interacting with each other less personally, but we seem to be somehow better engaged as a result of it. It's a very interesting dynamic right now in terms of change. And I know you said it's not necessarily that people are happier, but I think that I think what you really mean is that they're more confident in their work, in that they know it's making a difference to themselves and other people, and that's okay.
That's right.
And
that's right. That doesn't mean we need to agree to everything our people in the organization ask for, right? The amount of conversations I had about flexible working, about 4-day work weeks, because again, our industry likes to absorb trends and deploy trends to differentiate themselves. Do they always make sense? Probably not, but we have to give people credit and think about it and stop for a moment and think like, okay, does this make sense for our clients? Does it make sense for our business? Does it make sense for the people? And then test it out. So right now, as an example, I think as a business, we would make a mistake not trying to return to office to a certain extent. But that's my thesis. Why? Because I think a creative ideation, a strategy workshop over Zoom is not going to develop the same experience or deliver the same experience that I was used to pre-pandemic. And I can only draw from my own experience, but I remember standing and sitting in war rooms sometimes through the night, and I'm not expecting that from people nowadays, right? But being in this war room and sharing and sharing that experience, to be in the trenches with the team, with probably through 16 hours, and coming out of that war room with a beautiful presentation for a client and being really proud of it and celebrate that success afterwards, created a very unique bond in the team. And that led to better ideas and better creativity and better strategies from my perspective, because you could trust each other. So this is just an example. So I do believe that technology has allowed us to be, again, as always, more efficient, right? We can schedule ourselves time more flexible. We can do multiple things in a day instead of, commuting for 50 minutes one way or something like that. Nevertheless, we do need to still deliver an excellent work product. And that's what we get paid for. So we need to figure out a balance. And saying generally no is a mistake, just like saying generally yes, right? So you have to test different things out. And the benefit we have as a smaller organization is we can do it, right? We can test it because it doesn't have $1 billion impact right now. So it's a similar, and again, I'm probably going too deep here, but when I got my first email address, it was a Yahoo Mail email address, right? And Yahoo was next to AOL and some others.
Hey, I still have one.
There you go, or Hotmail. They were the behemoth in owning the user, right? Because that was your primary destination every time you switched on your computer and dialed into the internet. How did Google succeed replacing all of them? It was a very simple principle. They said, we give people something they can't give them, because when they have to give it, it's going to cost them billions of dollars. It doesn't cost me anything. So testing something new as a small organization, and we have 550 people or something, cost me nothing. But if you want to change 100,000 people business, it's going to cost you billions of dollars. So that's why, as in every industry, at some point there's an inflection point where smaller speedboats going to take over, because they're simply more flexible to adjust their principles, their work ethos, their infrastructure towards what the new market environment looks like. And we have never been, besides with the invention of the internet in the recent history, we have never been at an inflection point that came from both sides. A fundamental shift from what clients need and a fundamental shift to how work environment looks like, right? So that is an opportunity zone that I think lots of people are going to try to take advantage of.
So are you a speedboat?
I think in the size we are, definitely. And this is why I raised the capital, because at some point, the wave's going to be too big for a speedboat. At that time, you have to have a boat big enough that can withstand these waves.
Yes,
so
you're going to need a bigger boat, as they said in Jaws. Yes, yes, yes.
Exactly. That's right. And we are battling with sharks here. It's the reality of the business.
But right? just for clarification, so is Meet the People kind of a new holding company model? Just to clarify, or to say it in your words, because I don't want to misrepresent something that you're not. I'm just trying to understand it. Yeah.
I've tried to avoid saying that we are a holding company, because it comes with all the legacy expectations of a holding company. But the more I talked with smart marketeers that luckily we do employ, we always came back that avoiding that is a mistake as well, because technically we are. Like, if you want to go down to the technicalities of it, we hold different agencies within one equity ecosystem, right? So we're technically a holding company. But I would call us the anti-holding company, because we're trying to make these things different. Like, we don't want our agencies to feel that, oh, I have to report my finances up and they don't care about anything else but EBITDA. We do. Of course, we do care about profitability. Of course, we care about the growth of the business, because I've raised capital. People want their capital back plus, right? So we do have to deliver results. But it is not the only priority. And sadly, so once you are a listed company, that is the only priority, because you're not in charge of your own business then anymore. And I've ran a listed company with 1,000 people in Europe, and I was shocked how the behavioral pattern had to change purely because of the external pressure of what an analyst thinks of what I just told you, right? So it's not really to people's fault that these large companies are running the way they are running, but it is really from the financial pressure they get on delivering targets to keep the share price high. We have the luxury, we don't need to do that, right? And we're going to try to take full advantage of that, again, of that moment in time where for the next years, we don't have to think about these things, and we can actually spend money on making people, I don't want to say happier, but creating a better work environment that creates ideally a better work output. Yeah.
No, that certainly, I think you clarify that well. And it sounds like we could talk on a lot of subjects for a very long time. So
there's right.
There's two things that I'm I think I'd be curious about, and maybe that will bring it to a natural close.
Hmm.
One we've alluded to back and forth, even though we're talking a lot about people, and even as we enter a point where brands are talking more about being more humanistic,
Hmm.
we haven't talked about the elephant in the room, which is technology, and I think maybe we talk a little bit about that. And then the other thing, maybe to wind it up, is I'm really curious about that intersection of you being an entrepreneur and what that entrepreneurial mindset can lend to the whole sense of innovation that theoretically comes from advertising and marketing. So let's
Right.
start with technology.
Yeah. So again, life always comes back to basic principles, right? And I think we face these questions every day. You walk the street and you run into a situation where your basic ethical principles you're deploying kind of every minute of the day, and it can be because you're crossing paths with someone in Manhattan on the street, or it's a fundamental conversation at home with your family and friends. So I always try to live by the same principles. I try to not think about technology replacing humans, because that is something that's completely out of our control, if we're honest about it. So how can I make sense of technology? And for me, technology can always only be a tool to be probably more efficient and take workload off people that is repetitive and unnecessary if technologized. So people can spend their time on things that really matter. And in many cases, through the pandemic, we realized, you know what? Sitting on a train for 50 minutes one way doesn't really matter, you know? So I can get 50 minutes or 2 hours back in the day and do something that's more meaningful, either for the business or for myself, right? So that's what technology should do. What technology should not do is it should not dictate to us what creativity is going to look like, what our day should look like, right? That is a mistake. And I think social blends these borders very often because social media, sadly so, the content on social projects an image and a world that then our children aspire to live in, even though they don't have the experience to judge if that is really the world they want to live in, right? So it is blending more and it's bleeding into each other, reality versus in real life, IRL versus the digital life. But nevertheless, my general principle in business is it's not going to replace that. It's going to make us better in the how we manage time, how we output, and how we utilize our time. That doesn't mean it's not going to disrupt jobs, right? And it's always been that way, right? Like industrialization disrupted tons of jobs. Now we can build cars within a few hours, right? It took us weeks to build a car. So the same thing's going to happen in our industry as well. If I look at copywriting or if I look at the creative ideation process, can technology now help to probably do 70% of that work, especially in the beginning? Because thanks to AI and global databases, we can just type in what we want, and AI is going to have done all the research in milliseconds that a research department would have to do over weeks. That's obviously going to make a massive change, but ultimately the product still has to be touched by a human and refined by a human to make it theirs. Because I always, and I have a panel actually tonight on AI and the impact of AI on our industry. As long and when I talk technology right now, everybody wants to talk AI, so that's why I'm talking AI. But as long as, and I'm talking about agencies our size who work for clients like IBM, like Google, like LVMH, like relevant size businesses. We can't have AI replace our people because as long as we haven't touched the work, it's not our intellectual property. And I can't sell something to a client that is not my intellectual property because that's what they buy, what they pay for. So can a small agency of one person project a team of 10 people and give you creative output and copywriting? Yes, absolutely. But you as a client will never own that. It's going to be owned by open source. It's going to be owned by Microsoft, by Google, whoever develops AI. So we have to still make sense of some of these things, but a lot of pieces of technology are going to be extremely helpful. Think about blockchain being helpful in a creative process where multiple people have to have an opinion and you need to track back who had what opinion at what point, right? These technologies made sense 50 years ago. We just didn't have them. So it would take armies of people to do it. So you don't need that anymore. So again, I think the more repetitive, so if people don't evolve in their jobs, because it has become, and I'm judgy here, it has become easy to not challenge yourself because you can hide behind a screen at home. If you don't challenge yourself and you have a repetitive job, there is a likelihood that your job's going to be disrupted by technology. If you progress in your career and your ambition to learn more and bring more things to the table to connect dots, there's a very small likelihood to be replaced by technology. But that has always been the case.
No, I think you're right. I can remember a time when they said that the careers of the future were people that brought together different disciplines. Like I'm of course now I like being this is ultra professional, but being a lawyer that specialized in the medical profession. I mean, that way you've got two very specialized areas. But well, I guess we will soon see. And
Yes.
I'm curious on a softer subject of just to close out today's conversation. Do you think there is some kind of an essential link between the entrepreneurial mindset and what's necessary to always combat disruption in the whole business of brands and advertising and marketing?
I think it has to do with challenging the given, and that's not
Say that
necessarily
again. Say it again.
challenging
The
the
given.
given and
Yeah.
the given environment, right? So I try to not think that entrepreneurship or entrepreneurial energy is something you inherit. I think you accumulate that over experiences again, right? But I think it has to do with the fundamental curiosity to challenge your environment and what's given to you. And that rebelliousness can come from multiple things. It can come from your childhood, right? That your parents were already, I don't know, like telling you you have to stick to the rules and you always wanted to break out. It can come from geographical restriction. It comes from some kind of restriction or confinement where I think you want to break out. And how does that translate in advertising? Well, the beauty of advertising is that, and also the problem I think is, and I mentioned the shiny object syndrome, is that there is constant change all the time. Because in many trades, let's say, I don't want to call lawyers not that they are not trendy or can't innovate, but there is less innovation in the legal trade than it is in the advertising industry. And that attracts a lot of people to advertising because you can learn so much so quickly and you can be so creative, even if you're in the media space, because there's constant change with platform formats. You know, the entire industry has been has changed fundamentally every couple of years. So that is very attractive to certain minds that like that. And for entrepreneurs, and there is another reason why it's attractive for entrepreneurs, that is, it doesn't need any tangible, it doesn't need capital as such. Like you can build some, like every service business functions like that, right? You can build a service business without any capex. You don't need a factory, you don't need a building. You can start in your bedroom on your computer, cost you $1,200, and you're online, you have a computer, you're ready to go, and you can sell your own service. That means your time. So it's an attractive field because you don't need anything. There's no entry barrier as such, but your own mind. So I think that attracts a lot of entrepreneurs. And this is why the advertising industry as such is so incredibly fragmented. We have more than 14,000 advertising agencies in the United States alone, right? So that's, I think that describes it really well.
Well, I would say that you've given everyone a lot to think about, not only in terms of business models and shiny objects and technology, but also in just considering just the evolution of how we view the world and what that means in terms of considering brands and considering people's contributions to making them more viable. So I hope that we continue our conversations. And also good luck on your panel this evening.
Thank you. Yes, I'm excited about it as well. We're going to be 4 or 5 people up on stage, and most of them are way younger than I am. So I'm excited about hearing their POV, because obviously, as I said, we can only draw from our experiences in life. Ultimately, right? We can read a ton of books, but you know how this is. Like, you can tell your children to not put their hand on the stove. They're still going to do it at some point, because if it doesn't hurt, they haven't learned it. So experiences are built like that. They're built either on trust, or you really go through it yourself. So I can only create my thesis on the back of my experiences. And this is why I like these in-person events that we are doing once a month, actually, here in New York City, where we have around 100 attendees, and we talk about a topic that matters right now. We did it around Jay-Z and the new Gen Z, not Jay-Z, that would be fun. Gen Z and the new work environment. We did it about NFTs and how that might change business models and creativity, right? So because that stuff matters, people are really interested in that. But what I love most about these panels is the human interaction, and hearing from, well, people who are 20 years younger than me telling me, you know what, that makes no sense to me. Right? So yeah, so I'm excited about that. So thank you.
Well, a pleasure, and good luck with all of these ventures. And I do hope that we continue to have conversations. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
The Internationalist focuses on the continual reinvention of marketing by highlighting inspirational marketers around the world and their ideas as they move the industry forward. Internationalist Marketing TV shares these perspectives through interviews and personal stories. Thanks so much for watching. If you find this kind of content helpful, please click like or subscribe. Again, thanks so much.